Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. We've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. So, a new game is kind of sweeping the internet right now. Helldivers 2 is a great multiplayer game. A lot of people are jumping onto it. A lot of people are really saying this is the return of great multiplayer shooters. It's everything fun that you want. The return of hanging out with your friends and really enjoying this, playing a game just because it allows you to create a story with your friends. But alongside this, there has also been a lot of criticism. The game has a very particular aesthetic. It has an attempt to satirize, bring perhaps a certain political message. And there's been a lot of debate over this. Half of this is just me taking the excuse to talk about video games, but the other half of it is getting to dive in and talk about what I think is a very interesting aspect that this game allows us to criticize or look at when it comes to our culture. The Prudentialist wrote a great essay on this, as he so often does, and so I really wanted to have him on to talk about this. Prudentialist, thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me on again, Auron. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Like I said, your piece was really good. I'd already been had the wheels turning about some of this, and you bringing up Paul Godfrey's anti-fascist state in relation to this game, I think, really hit the nail on the head. So we want to dive into the game, give a little bit of background, and then talk about the politics that and the controversy that is also attached to it. But before we do all that, guys, let's hear about ISI. Universities today aren't just neglecting real education, they're actively undermining it, and we can't let them get away with it. America was made for an educated and engaged citizenry. The Intercollegiate Studies Institute is here to help. ISI offers programs and opportunities for conservative students across the country. ISI understands that conservatives and right of center students feel isolated on college campuses and that you're often fighting for your own reputation, dignity, and future. Through ISI, you can learn about what Russell Kirk called the permanent things, the philosophical and political teachings that shaped and made Western civilization great. ISI offers many opportunities to jumpstart your career. They have fellowships at some of the nation's top conservative publications like National Review, The American Conservative, and The College Thinker. If you're a graduate student, ISI offers funding opportunities to sponsor the next great generation of college professors. Through ISI, you can work with conservative thinkers who are making a difference. Thinkers like Chris Rufo, who currently has an ISI researcher helping him with his book. But perhaps most importantly, ISI offers college students a community of people that can help them grow. If you're a college student, ISI can help you start a student organization or a student newspaper or meet other like-minded students at their various conferences and events. ISI is here to educate the next generation of great Americans. To learn more, go to isi.org. That's isi.org. All right, so Helldivers 2, let's get a little background on this video game first, because I used to be a big gamer, but, career and family and everything has just consumed a lot of this free time. I haven't been able to keep up like I used to. I'm lucky if I can get in a few games, at the end of a night, if I'm lucky. And so I'm just not familiar as I used to be with the kind of stuff that's coming out and what's going on. Where did this game come from? Obviously it's a sequel, Helldivers 2, but I'd never heard of the original one and I wasn't familiar with this studio. It's a big hit, but it's not coming out of a studio I'm familiar with. What's the background here?
Yeah, so the game was made by Arrowhead Game Studios. They're headquartered in Stockholm, Sweden. They're kind of new to the scene. They were founded in 2008. Have around 100 employees that work there, according to what I could look up. And they made the first game in 2015 as sort of a top-down sort of shooter. They've done a lot of sort of top-down multiplayer and cooperative games like that. And so this is their big hit sort of, and it definitely is shown. They had server issues when the game released because they had only planned out for so many thousand people to play it, and they're at capacity when 500,000 people are trying to play it, myself included. You and I've played a few games together as well, and I mean it's an enjoyable experience, but it kind of was timed just perfectly because at the same time this game is released and everyone's talking about it, my Twitter timeline for like 3 weeks was talking about nothing more than Paul Verhoeven's take on Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers and why that movie fails as satire. The author and writer Isaac Young had a very viral thread that got over 1 million views talking about why this isn't, it fails as satire, but it still is a great piece of art. And that led to numerous people on the left talking about why it's important to sympathize with the bugs. And you have a game that has a very similar aesthetic, just armored military guys, powered armor, fighting against, bugs, and you're doing as much fun as you can. It's a quite enjoyable experience, but at the same time, there's homage, everything down from the music to the propaganda posters and videos that you see, right to the very beginning, where the Ministry of Truth tells you to watch this propaganda video as you witness this guy watch his wife and kid get eaten by a bug and then gets radicalized to join the military. So, I mean, it's very similar to, I'm from Buenos Aires and I say kill them all. It's a very fun time.
Yeah, it was interesting because I saw the explosion of people having the old Starship Troopers discourse, which isn't new. It's this eternal cycle. This piece of media is quite old. It came out when I was like in middle school, or even older actually. At this point, it's a very old film. At this point, and so people have had this debate over and over again, but it always returns in different waves. And I wasn't aware that there was attached to this video game because, like I said, I'm pretty far outside of the video game cycle at this point, the news and knowing what's new and what's going on. I've kind of burned out on these video games as a service games. Like I said, my gaming time is limited. And so the idea of, oh, this is going to be my life now and I'm going to grind this out every single day, it's just not attractive. If anything, I'm looking for video games that are shorter at this point, so I have a well-designed experience that I can kind of enjoy in the small amount of time I have, rather than something that's looking to just eat up as much of my life as possible. My hours are actually like somewhat valuable to me as a human being, and I don't want to just light them on fire. And so this model didn't sound great to me. But having played the game now a decent amount, I'm still pretty low level. I'm not caught up with many of you, but but having played a decent amount at this point, it really is a lot of fun. I enjoyed everything, and like you said, you can tell right away that this is an unlicensed Starship Troopers ripoff from the very beginning. You walk into the original video, the intro video, and it is this Ministry of Truth propaganda video, and you go through the tutorial and it's very clearly like you're a disposable cog in the machine of democracy, and you need to go ahead and battle all these space bugs, and it's got the comical splat of meet this interesting wildlife as the blood of the bug is just spattering all over you. So it's wearing its influences directly on its sleeves from the beginning. But like you said, we entered into the cycle of discourse because it's very clear that the interests of the company was to lean as hard into this satire as possible, to show, oh, we're downplaying this, we don't think this is good, we're not promoting this idea, this patriotism, this level of military involvement. But just like Starship Troopers, it kind of immediately falls apart. That attempt at satire falls apart because what they're depicting, well, we can get into it. There's a lot there, but what they're depicting is far closer to actually what we have now in the global American empire than it is to anything like fascism, which is, of course, the first thing that people's minds go to when you have like cool capes and a skull somewhere on a helmet.
Yeah, and a lot of the I hate the word discourse because it has such a muddied, ugly term on the internet. But I mean, a lot of the writing from games journalists, which we press S to spit. It's been 10 years on since Gamergate. But I mean, a lot of people were saying that this is sort of the anti-fascist answer to games like Call of Duty, where it's and I mean, the Call of Duty series has been well associated with the military. There are numerous military consultants and advisors for those games to be produced, from weapons to story to narrative to technological capability. And so to have a game that sort of is trying to make fun of, military adventurism in the name of, quote, managed democracy, you can't help but feel like this is more of an accurate representation of the world around you than anything else. I mean, I kind of wish I had recorded my reaction, because when the video plays, it's sort of the first thing that you have to watch if you sign on for the first time, and you're kind of watching this sort of like schlubby, skinny, fat white guy say hello to the soldiers walking down these like clean suburban streets, like visions of based world happen, and then all of a sudden you watch his black wife and his mixed race child get like brutally murdered on and off screen by the bugs that you'll be killing later in the game. And then all of a sudden, you're realizing that, oh, this is way more like any commercial I'd see online for any sort of television ad for recruiting, or, well, not so much recruiting anymore. They try to get white guys to join the army again. But the progressive messaging is right on board. I mean, it's the same problem you saw with Bethesda Starfield, where it's more token progressive representation than to explain why these characters are the way they are. Like I'll log on and I'll jump onto my ship, and then all of a sudden there's a woman who's the shipmaster. Her name is Skogsberg is her last name, but she looks so ethnically ambiguous you don't know how she got the name Skogsberg. But neither here nor there, right? And all of a sudden, the words about liberty or freedom and managed democracy, the same kind of terms that we hear President Joe Biden talk about, or the fortified democracy of 2020. And it sort of falls flat in the same way that the whole Starship Troopers argument falls flat, because the world that you're trying to make fun of, one, the combat loop is really entertaining. It's a lot of fun to play with friends and to talk over them and to, try and survive the best. It uses the same engine as a Warhammer game, so that makes it even better. But also because, the world that we live in, why do we call the global American empire? I mean, Helen Andrews wrote about that in the American Conservative not too long ago, last year, where it's we're promoting things like feminism. The idea of the guise of human rights allows us to commit the most insane forms of inhumanity ever, as Carl Schmitt remarks, where we're trying to destroy cultures, languages, religious traditions for the sake of maintaining an empire that wants to trans your kids and to promote gay marriage and uproot any sort of culture and language that you once had, for the sake of being part of this greater managed democratic empire. And that's sort of the problem with a lot of these satire pieces these days about trying to make fun of fascism or use fascist aesthetics to make fun of their worldview is that most often than not, you're going to come off looking like the real world more than anything else, to a point where I almost want to use like Jonah Goldberg's term, liberal fascism, if that term wasn't so cringe. But it really does illustrate that the managed democracy world of like Helldivers 2 and their attempts of making fun of it is far more realistic to what we have today than anything else, where it is a girl boss, multi-ethnic, multiracial. The military is integrated in terms of the sexes, just like Starship Troopers. And, even though you're a useless cog in the machine, the primary demographic for gamers these days are still white males, and you're the only helmeted character. So there you go, dying for an empire that finds you disposable. And if you manage to get anything to survive, congratulations, you'll be on addicted substances for the rest of your time. Similar to, painkillers in the VA and how we've killed thousands of our vets over the last 15, 20 years. So it hits more closer to home than it does making fun of any sort of fascist regime in the mid and early 20th century.
Yeah, it really is that importing of the progressive narrative into the whole thing. They can't make a video game that doesn't have that level of representation, right? The message has to be there even when the satire is supposed to be front and center. And so you need your mixed race couples and you have to have women involved. When you're in the game, if you want to choose your body style, it's there's no male and female. It's brawny and or more feminine, but they can't call it that because that would
type A and type B body types. And you've noticed this, and
right.
I mean, even Japanese studios have sort of leaned into catering towards the Western demographic in that respect. And I mean, this goes on the face of things that there are numerous consultant groups, whether it's like Sweet Baby Inc. or of course the infamous Anita Sarkeesian, right, where there is this sort of threat and sort of progressive Damocles over the necks of any major studio, wherein, if you're not, progressive and diverse enough, then lo and behold, this could be very bad for you. And I mean, it's an excellent extortion racket, don't get me wrong. And in the future, one day we shall be doing the same things with our own respective media. But this isn't just about this one particular game. I think it's a good jumping off point, because you'll notice in all forms of science fiction media, or especially long-term franchises as well. I mean, Halo is a really great example of how far it has fallen from its former early 2000s greatness, to where now, of course, it is a, same sort of multi-ethnic, sexually integrated armed forces, in the same way that it's all there here in Helldivers 2. And it's very reflective to what, we would call the anti-fascist state from, Dr. Paul Gottfried. He wrote this great book in 2021 called Antifascism, The Course of a Crusade. Highly recommend that you read it. Is probably one of his best books. And if you don't mind, Auron, I'm going to quote it from a little bit here. And this is from page 137. Quote, In contrast to the fascist state, which held its plebiscitary events to affirm what the regime planned to do, the anti-fascist state holds elections between mostly indistinguishable candidates and parties. Leaders of the anti-fascist state can mold public opinion without having to resort to overly transparent manipulation because they can avail themselves of an international body of support consisting of multinational corporations, the mainstream media, and almost all public institutions in the West. Next to the sophisticated resources available to the anti-fascist state, the sight of Mussolini delivering a speech in Rome's Palazzo Venezia might seem bizarre and ancient. And I mean, that very is true where we're at here. Everything is meant to mold public opinion to get it on board. And alongside that, the anti-fascist state is all about erasing, any sort of culture, tradition, ethnicity, language, tradition. It all has to be one together because there's only one global thing that causes us to move forward for progress, and that is the specter of fascism.
Yeah, that's the very managed democracy that they're mocking, right? Is
Yeah.
the exact type of democracy that we see all around us. Oh, well, we get all of these different stories about how the ability of people to vote for Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. I see that you have, rural white voters over there. They might be a threat to democracy. The most dangerous thing to democracy seems to be the people actually being allowed to select their leaders in a democratic fashion. And so it is the very thing that they're attempting to satirize is the thing that they would support, is that the thing that these people would support in real life. And it's very strange, like I was saying, because while they import all of this stuff into the game because they have to have this diverse cast, they're people who are supporting them, the people online who would attack them for not having these things in there, they would be angry if that wasn't in this future version of fascism. And so you look at this kind of super Earth, future fascist state, quote unquote, and you realize it has all of the things that progressives think prevent fascism. It features all of those things, and so the only thing that codes it as fascist is the fact that people are safe and they love their country or world. In this case, they're patriotic and like they have cool stuff on. That's it. That's the only thing. It looks cool and people are happy and people are safe. That's what's supposed to indicate that it's fascist. Like everything else about it is decidedly, as you say, anti-fascist. It's all the things that you would think would be coded as anti-fascist. It's all the progressive narratives and all the things that would prevent fascism. And yet none of those things are acknowledged. And instead, the only things that are supposed to code this as a fascist satire are the things that kind of make it fun and a place you would actually want to be in.
Well, I mean, that's sort of the funny thing about a lot of these progressive tropes that you see in gaming, but also in just mainstream media as well, is that, I mean, like take HBO's, I think it's on HBO Max, the whole television alternate timeline for all mankind, wherein the idea that America wins the space race and becomes this great spacefaring civilization along with the rest of the world because the Soviets beat us to the moon in '69 is kind of funny because the whole future timeline split indicates that, well, if America wants to succeed and beat the commies and to beat the private sector, it has to double down on sort of its fully automated gay space liberalism, where everyone is diverse and we can be competent. When you look at the real world and you know that that's not true at all, whether it be from airlines or the state of American infrastructure, or that we're relying more and more on immigrant labor and technical capabilities than we are domestically. And you're just the dissonance between what people consider to be anti-fascism and being good progressives and putting on yourselves the right side of history is quite funny, because you look at some of the things that get said in sort of like the tips section when you're diving in the game, right? Shoot anyone that manages to negotiate with you diplomatically. So very similar to how you can't really have a dialogue with a rabid leftist. They're there to smash your brains out with a bike lock. They're not there to do anything else. Or that, you have to trust the science when it comes to certain medical procedures that are out there. You're there for democracy, and that you can't forget to understand that if democracy only works when you're hungry, angry, and fighting. And it's sort of a weird, like, the woke are more correct than the mainstream moment, where it's like, oh yeah, democracy really only does tend to work on such a mass scale when you're willing to kill millions of people in order to make it happen. And then you look at the news and you think about, oh, the rural white male voters that they hate, and it's like, oh, they really want to kill millions of rural white people because they wanted to vote for Donald Trump. And again, I noticed when I was playing it not too long ago with a friend of mine that we had finally found a white person in the game who's working in the back as a munitions operator for one of the airstrikes that you can call in on your ship. And it was just funny because, as Gottfried says, anti-fascism involves sprawling administration, efforts to demasculinize and de-ethnicize populations, a term favored by the German government officials of our time who do not want to be associated with any terms like nation or Volk. The anti-fascist regime operates with forces dedicated to fighting, quote, hate with mass media and public education. And again, like, that's the world that we kind of live in now. And it's because we live in that world, an anti-fascist one. Jacques Derrida was wrong. We're not haunted by the specter of Marx. We're haunted by the specter of fascism or anything that could resemble El Duce or the Fuhrer or anything like that. And so all of our media has to constantly reify and reiterate these sort of quasi-religious fervors where the state religion, since the end of the Second World War, is to ensure that anything that resembles nationalism, anything that resembles homogenous states and countries is to be punished and to be eliminated. I mean, one only has to look at what happened in the United Kingdom earlier this week, where, a gentleman simply putting up stickers warning about demographic replacement wasn't even arrested for any actual crime, but rather his intent, because he held beliefs that were contrary to the public religion of making sure that diversity is our strength and that we can be a great cosmopolitan, metropolitan world and a new kind of Great Britain, so to speak, where, the immigrants come there rather than anything else. And so that's sort of the world that we live in. And our media, from video games to music to all sorts of endorsements from celebrities, illustrates that, to add as a corollary to your term, Auron, the total state is an anti-fascist state. And it has to be if it wants to survive, because any resistance to it has to be viewed as the greatest public evil in the West as we know it, despite the fact that evil has been dead for over 80 years.
Yeah, and you can tell because they're coding functional society as fascists at this point, like, which is a really interesting and dangerous game to play. But yeah, it was amazing that that event in the UK. Of course, we know that they've arrested people for praying silently outside of abortion clinics. They all kinds of insane stuff in the UK. I'm trying to remember who was talking about it, but it was something like 400 people had been arrested in Russia last year for saying something against the government. Over 3,000 had been arrested in the UK for saying things that the government doesn't like online. Obviously, the Blaze, we just had a reporter arrested for simply reporting on the events that happened during January 6th, as where regime-approved reporters can walk right into the Capitol and face no punishment for that. It's very clear that the West has a very managed form of government, a very managed form of democracy. It's clamping down on any and everyone who thinks incorrectly, and we're supposed to pretend that somewhere Vladimir Putin is the most dangerous threat to our democracy. But I want to get more into some of the parodies in there, some of the propaganda in there, because it is interesting. At some point, you feel like maybe one of our guys is in there writing this stuff, because it's just like there's no way they're not self-aware enough to realize what's happening here. But before we do all that, guys, let me tell you about your absolute moral duty as an employer to hire based people through New Founding. Hey guys, I need to tell you about today's sponsor, New Founding Talent. Look, we all know that the job market is a disaster right now. Based people can't find good companies to work for, and good companies can't find anybody to get the job done. The competency crisis is very, very real. So how do we get these two incredibly important groups together? We need organizations like New Founding. New Founding has created a network of high excellence professionals who are seeking to join grounded American businesses. These are individuals often in elite organizations who are ready for a team and a mission that supports their values instead of working against them. Aligned companies are already using this network to hire high trust, exceptional individuals who can match the culture and mission of their teams. So if you're looking for better employees to build a better world, you need to go ahead and apply for access to the New Founding Talent Network at newfounding.com/talent. You'll get connected with candidates who will build your business. That's newfounding.com/talent. Check it out today. So one of the fun things about the game is if you're just standing on the bridge of your ship and you can name your ship an assortment of random and ridiculous things. But when you're standing on your ship as you're waiting for maybe to queue up with friends or something like that, the propaganda is playing. The Ministry of Truth videos are playing as you stand there. And so I was kind of doing things while I was waiting for possible people to join me, and so I ended up hearing some of those in the background. And the one of them was about equality and the how critical equality was, to Super Earth, to the global American empire in space. And the attempt at satire was, oh well, everyone is equal. Equal is, equality is fundamental to Super Earth and its empire and what we're fighting for. But the more dedicated you are to the cause, the more equal you become. And so the more you'll sacrifice on kind of in support of the regime, the more equal you will be in the eyes of those that operate it. And I'm just sitting there and thinking, how does anyone write that and not realize they're talking about today, right now? This is not some future fascist empire. It's literally just the way we treat people in the United States today. And how could the people writing this not be aware that the very propaganda they're attempting to satire is the stuff that is applied to them on a regular basis?
And I mean, I'm sure they'll make a claim that that was the intent, even if, it clearly is way too on the nose to make you feel like that this would be the constant broadcast of some, great leader type deal. You see this with some very masculine white voice sounding General Brash that's telling you all these hints and tips about how to succeed in the game and to use cooperative, like, two-man weapons to encourage team play and things like that. But at the same time, you listen to them, and I screen capped quite a few that I thought were interesting to go through for the essay I wrote, but also just because they're really entertaining. So for instance, keep Super Earth safe by reporting any unpatriotic behavior to your democracy officer, which, I mean, you see that all the time with human with
That's
human
right. We call them
resources.
human resource officers.
Yeah, they're HR, right? Like that's basically it. We have there's whole memes about when a joke that you made at work is so funny, HR wants to hear the joke that you had said, and that's very concerning. Other ones, of course, like managed democracy is the cornerstone of an advanced civilization. Or when you achieve the win condition for extraction in a match, it will now say another victory for the right side of history, which of course the right side of history corresponds very well with sort of the end of history narrative that liberalism is the end all be all success story for how we in the West are to manage and to survive and what we're supposed to do. And it does have the same problem that political comedies or political thrillers had during the Trump years and still do. I mean, after Trump got elected, television shows like Veep or House of Cards had to jump the shark in a writer's room just to be stranger than fiction, despite the fact that 1980s, real estate mogul and, Apprentice star Donald Trump was the president of the United States, and whatever he tweeted out was far more interesting than whatever Frank Underwood or, Julia Louis-Dreyfus could ever come up with in their respective shows and stories. And it does illustrate that you can try and make a parody as hard as you want, but it's so transparently bad. Like, I know what this is. It's a greater reflection of my own world. And if this is where some extreme people on the left might say we do live in a fascist state and that this is important for us to conceptualize something else, then I'm sorry, like, this is not fascism at all. And we're nowhere near what fascism actually is. And to go back to, Paul Gottfried's book, I mean, he has a whole chapter on this called Defining and Redefining Fascism, to where, we're nowhere near the 1920s, 30s, or 40s at all. But instead, you have people out there that are doing things like Jason Stanley's How Fascism Works, the politics of us against them. And he claims that fascism is the authoritarian response to globalization and not fascism's original direction, which was a brutal and quick violent response and reaction to Bolshevism and communism, which had way more power over in the Western Europe, and we had our own Red Scare in America, where countless people were bombed and attacked and murdered during the the end of the Great War and the end of the 1920s and 30s. To where now it just evolves to where anything that's a response to globalization, mass migration, the absolute destruction of nations and peoples, that's fascism. If you react to the destruction of your people and the destruction of your country and its traditions, if you don't like the fact that the Robert E. Lee statue was melted down and then gloriously gloated by regime media, that makes you a fascist, according to these people. And because that's all that this is, all of a sudden, Trump's America is somehow Hitler's Germany, despite the fact that those two leaders couldn't be further on other ends of the political spectrum at all. But this is the world that we live in. Everything has to be fascism. It's right around the corner. Everything is going to be leading towards fascism. And this is, again, why the left is the true owners of like the Schmittian exception and the state of emergency, because to them, every election is the most existential election ever, whether it's Joe Biden back in 2012 saying that black people will be put back in chains, when it comes to the election of, a guy who spent $45,000 on a consultant on how to wear mom jeans, Mitt Romney. But this is the world that we live in, because any reaction to the present being as awful and as ugly as it is, that's fascism. And we even see this with people like that Josh Urkel guy from Project Liberal on Twitter, which is basically Occupy Democrats, but for Twitter, where he had the iceberg meme where it's like, I hate ugly things. And then the bottom of the iceberg is a picture of Hitler. This kind of hyperbole is the, just the natural position of the anti-fascist state of the West, because anything like looking back towards the past, where we have color footage of a better world and functioning cities and societies, they have to constantly tell you that that's bad, to a point where there was a viral tweet a few weeks ago showing a high school from 2002 and how it wasn't fights and it wasn't drugs and it was pretty nice as a hot public high school can get. And someone said, oh, these people would have called me a homophobic slur, 22 years ago. And it's just, we have to constantly make the past evil so that the march of progress illustrates some kind of victory for their ideology, despite the fact that I think everyone can look around and see that this ideology and this state-mandated religion of anti-fascism, anti-nationalism, anti-immigration is, not working very clearly. I mean, we have little to no sovereignty in the United States when it comes to the Chinese buying land in America. We have no sovereignty when it comes to numerous people taking money from the cartels along the U.S.-Mexico border. We have no border at all whatsoever. And the nation itself is being cheered on for its destruction. I mean, this is what leftism is, right? The whole suicide contagion and ideology on a civilizational scale. And this is, and again, even our popular culture and our media and our games, even if they're not made by Americans, because this studio is from Sweden, all that it tells you is that this kind of ideology is so far, so vast, so everywhere, that if you think some competent military that can maintain an empire is fascism, despite the fact that, the things that the state fights for these days, the idea of human rights and democracy, meaning, transgender surgeries and, gay propaganda in all sorts of countries. I don't know what to tell you, but I don't live in a fascist empire. I live in something probably far worse.
Yeah, I used to tweet out all the time, they have to destroy the beauty of the past so you don't realize how small and ugly they've made the world, because that shatters the illusion of progress, the lie of progress. And progress is the entire goal. It's everything we're doing has to be worth it, because if you don't sacrifice all of these things, I mean, we just had Jon Stewart say this, right? Like, getting mugged in a subway is just the price of democracy. It's just part and parcel of living in a modern city, right? Like, this is the deal we've made, is we have to sacrifice functioning societies for the anti-fascist vision. And so any attempt to look back at the past and say, oh, actually, like, buildings were nice and society was more peaceful and people got together and they had a shared vision and understanding of the future and these things, these were all, positive things. Well, no, that's fascism. And therefore fascism has just become this Manichaean term. It's just good and evil, and fascism is evil. It's been vacated of any actual political ideology. It doesn't actually reference, and this is why it drives me nuts when people on the right are like, oh, the Biden administration's becoming fascist. Like, guys, come on, like, have some level, just the small, I am begging you, Conning, I am desperately begging you right now, have just the smallest ability to maintain message discipline, just the tiniest amount of self-control when it comes to the language you use, so that you're not just feeding directly into the narrative of your enemies at every single opportunity. But
You know,
anyway,
for as much talk as is a lot of leftists on Twitter want to scream and reach about, media literacy, I'm asking Con Inc., please, for 5 seconds, have
just
some historical literacy and
for,
understand that your entire vocabulary is formulated around the left's frame game.
for the love of all that is good and holy, just the smallest bit of effort, just the tiniest amount. But yeah, this desperate attempt to vacate any actual historical context or political meaning from the term and just make it the blanket evil allows them to just destroy the past. That's all it is. It's just a blanket attempt to destroy the past. Progress is the god. Everything must be sacrificed for its good. There is no way to look back and understand anything else as valuable or valid. Only the new thing that the party is putting directly in front of you can be of any worth. And you mentioned this a couple times, so it's probably a good moment to step into it. Media literacy, right? Like this was a big part of the discussion too, because whenever we get into this, it's always like, well, the chuds are dumb, they don't get it. Starship Troopers is a satire of them. The chuds don't get it. Helldivers is a satire of what they want. And I made this point with, again, not knowing that this was about Helldivers at the moment. I made this point about Starship Troopers, and I got all of these responses from all the most insufferable leftists, because the tweet went wide and it got into the leftist Twitter as well. And they're like, "You just don't understand." And I had the exact same response that you mentioned in the essay, which is like, death of the author, guys. This is your whole thing. This is all you have pushed my entire life, is that the work doesn't mean what the work says. Once people get a hold of it, it's all about critique and deconstruction. And so, we can take every classical work and say that it was all actually about like some kind of Marxist struggle. And so, nothing actually means what it says, except this one movie by Paul Verhoeven. That's it. This is the only thing that is exactly they literally treat this as if it's fundamentalist Christian gospel, right? Sola Scriptura, but for Starship Troopers. It says exactly what it says in the movie, and that's all you can ever understand it as. And this is the only thing that is just biblically true from it and inerrant from its beginning. And you can't have any other read on it. Same thing with Helldivers. Just sorry, guys. The intention of the people making it is the only way you can understand it. There's no other read. And if you come up with anything else, you're just an idiot who has no media literacy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of terms like that, media literacy or touching grass, or these sort of nice cop-out terms to say I don't have to engage with it. And I mean, this goes back to a few things. I'll try and all weave together here. But I mean, for instance, going back to Gottfried's book, he points out that, some of these anti-fascist types say the alternative to, militant anti-fascism, which is what we live under right now, is to, quote, let's see here, have faith in the power of rational discourse, the police, and institutions of government to prevent the ascension of a fascist regime. To which Gottfried says, this same author then points that this is the same example of the strategy of appeasement leading up to the Second World War. So they're saying that there's no room for, discourse, there's no room for discussion, there's no room for death of the author, because all of a sudden that would mean, that we have to appease Hitler in 1939 and that we'll have peace in our time, but actually nothing does like that happen. But at the same time, media literacy is sort of the primary school of thought for how a lot of people read into media, and not just, video games, but also with film and art and literature, to where it is the way that we have to understand, well, this is clearly the author's intent. We have to read it this way. If we are media literate, we can understand this. And that is the more popular school of thought, rather than to consider, for instance, the McLuhan School, which I interviewed Marshall McLuhan's grandson, Andrew McLuhan, the head of the McLuhan Institute, not too long ago. I'd recommend that you guys check that out, because he told me, he's like, we're all focused on media literacy. We're all focused on content. We're so focused on the content and how to interpret it. We never consider the medium itself having an impact on our brain. So the drug-like qualities of like the Twitter discourse, where we're trying to get our new hits of black tar, digital heroin into our veins, we never consider that as we're trying to own leftists or chuds on Twitter.com. But instead, we're arguing over things like media literacy and the intent behind, as you said, sort of the sola scriptura approach of Paul Verhoeven's movie, or Arrowhead Game Studios' intent behind this. Whereas now with Twitter and being able to disintermediate, I don't have to rely on the authority of one person telling me how to interpret this. I can just tell everyone, hey, actually, no, this game is pretty base and you should enjoy it because you get to kill bugs and robots and it's cool because it's militaristic and futuristic and the game is great. To a point where it's not death of the author anymore, it's hijack of the author. The discursive airplane that we're all flying in right now has been hijacked by the chuds. Halo is based, Starship Troopers is based. All of a sudden, Helldivers 2 is based because I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying it despite your flagrant claims that it's satire and anti-fascism. I don't care. I can't hear you. I've shut the crew cabin in, and I'm going to fly this plane and tell everyone that it's fun and right-wing. And that's how it's going to work. So it's not even just death of the author. It's hijacking it, because they can still be there and scream impotently about what the movie's supposed to be or what the piece of media is. But at the same time, me and my friends don't care, and we're going to do it. I mean, that has its problems, of course, kind of like Con Inc., where you might be playing into the frame or the language of your foes. But I think it's better to take agency and sovereignty away from leftists than it would be for them to argue about language.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it would be better if we could create our own things. It would be great if the right had a large budget, to make huge movies and TV series and video games and all these things. That would be the ideal situation. But when you're in this position where you're trying to make as much original culture as you can, but you can't have control of all of these avenues, then being able to go ahead and hijack it, as you said, is a key aspect. Because okay, you think you're communicating how dangerous this is or how stupid this is or how no one would want to live this way. But we can notice that actually half the population does, and it really doesn't matter if you attack us or call us stupid or whatever. We're still going to enjoy this thing unironically. And what are you going to do about it, right? Again, the 40K, debate has raged forever. Oh, it's a satire. Yeah, we know. And still it's vast, the vast number of people playing are like military vets and, that kind of thing. Like, the people enjoying it obviously aren't enjoying it ironically. They really do like what's happening there. They really do enjoy the spirit and the story and the world and these things. And you can keep replying, oh, it's satire or whatever, but it doesn't matter because the people consuming it recognize the good parts of it and they leave the rest. And it doesn't matter. You don't have control of this frame anymore, and that has its own value for sure. All right, guys. Well, we're going to go ahead and pivot over to the questions of the people. But before we do, Prudentialist, where can people find this essay and all of your other great work?
Sure. So they can find this essay and similar ones like it over at theprudentialist.substack.com. I'm also on YouTube, Twitter, Telegram, all podcast platforms. Just look for The Prudentialist and look for your favorite frog. And outside of that, I will be alongside Auron later this June in the Memphis area in Tennessee. The Old Glory Club is hosting its first conference. Auron and I will both be speakers there. You can go get your tickets at oldgloryclub.com/tickets/events and have a really good time over there. And we hope to see some of you in person.
Absolutely. Always fun meeting people, getting to talk to a lot of people. You see them in chat, you run into them on Twitter or things for years, and then get to meet them at these meetups. It's really cool. All right. So Creeper Weirdo here says, but guys, fascism, satire, media literacy, fascism, satire, fascism. Yeah, it really is fun just watching the point and sputter approach to this. Just like how many buzzwords can we throw at people in the desperate hope that they'll stop noticing that some of the stuff is cool. Definitely entertaining. Trey 50 Daniels, Helldivers 2 advertising fascism right before Gamergate 2 gets started by Sweet Baby Inc. and the like. Peak irony. Yeah, I was not aware of this until like yesterday, but I guess there is this consulting company that has been going around to hey, here's how you increase diversity, or how you get all your ESG points basically for your new video game, so you can get investments in there. And this is kind of the new scandal that's breaking across the gaming world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they are a 2018 narrative development and consultant studio based in Montreal, working around the globe, and they've been getting into a lot of trouble for basically trying to cancel games for boycott lists that they've associated with, and a lot of this is trying their best to basically extort, as if they were a mafia group, to force diversity and inclusion into their game narratives. And if you thought what happened 10 years ago was rough, with regards to Five Guys Burgers and Fries, if you get that reference, you'll definitely understand that this is worse when now you have a legit business that is basically threatening people like, that's a nice video game you got there. It's a shame what would happen if we said it was racist and homophobic and didn't have enough beige, ethnically ambiguous characters inside. And so that this is the racket that you're dealing with and against there. And it does illustrate sort of the importance of indie developers and studios, because if you can make your own game and you can do your own fan project or make your own mod for something that's actually enjoyable, then I'm going to be more interested in that than any of the latest crap like Forspoken or anything like that.
Yeah, when we win, the narrative consultant agencies will have been stocked with people who have read Carlyle and De Maistre, right? That's
Yes.
your victory conditions there. Cooper Weirdo says fascism is a progressive ideology. Mussolini liked it and believed it because it was the newest. Yeah, a lot of people who are big fans of large chin men will hate that comment, but yeah, fascist is indeed a progressive ideology. It is a modernist ideology. It is a reaction, yes, to liberalism and communism, but it is still incredibly progressive in certain areas. And so I think people should probably think about that in general.
Yeah, I would just recommend people read Gottfried's book. It gets into that pretty well in depth.
Seneca says, all hail managed democracy. Well, thank you. Brew your cup of liberty and settle in for a little more of the stream here. Let's see. Capitalismo says real fascism is nerfing the railgun and breaker shotgun. Teach media meta literacy. Yeah, that does seem to be pretty much two weapons available in the game at the moment.
And they
That's
nerfed it this morning, which made them
Did they?
basically kind of, well, yeah, in a patch they kind of nerfed the go-to, because screw having a meta, right? You know, we have to keep things fresh and keep things moving. But it's what it is. What it is. Capitalissimo and I have played the game together quite a few times, going through it and making our notes, because he and I were just going through all the things we've observed over the last week, which was a big help in writing the essay. And he has a great podcast called The Sidebar, where they cover all of the pieces of fiction written by right-wing Twitter anons. So if you are interested in that, go check them out.
Man, that does sound like a good podcast. All right, so Creeper Weirdo says Paradise Lost, Satan is the good guy. Lord of the Rings, Frodo and Sam are gay. 1984, no, you Starship Troopers, fascism, satire, media literacy. Yes. Yeah, so all of these different readings that we have, all of these things that we have to accept about characters of the past, beloved characters, understandings of these different works, those are all acceptable. But again, the one piece of scripture that can never be deviated from is Paul Verhoeven's understanding of a book he only read like 1/4 of.
If that, right?
Yeah. Ben Dover says the degree to which the left and boomers hate managed democracy makes me think it might be a valid solution for some of our problems. Christ is king. Well, that's exactly what they have. They have a managed democracy. To be very clear, they could talk about the term as satire, but that's exactly what we're talking about, guys. When they're trying to actively remove the only real opposition candidate from the ballot, they're trying to throw him in jail. They're trying to jail opposition journalists. They're successfully actually jailing and arresting meme makers and opposition journalists. That's what managed democracy is. That's what that means. You technically have a democracy, but in reality, there's only one acceptable choice. And if you don't engage with that one, you will be attacked by the state. I mean, what else could that mean?
Yeah, you can call it managed, but in the same way that you can read, I mean, even from Yarvin's open letter, I think it's chapter 5 about the secret of government. That what is it other than the manipulation of procedural results to get a desired outcome? And
Yep.
who does that manipulation? Well, it's the managers, whether that be, a precinct captain scanning the same 5,000 votes over and over again in order to secure a fortified election victory, or large multinational corporations that are willing to spend tens of millions, if not billions of dollars to ensure that you and I and our political interests are never represented again by ethnic replacement, as well as legal lawfare means to do so.
Yeah, it's why they are desperate to increase the points of contact for regulation and everything, guys. It's a increase of the ability to manage outcomes. Grouper Weirdo, look, guys, a Nazi liked something once, therefore. Yes, I hear, who else drank water? I think we all know. Joshua Beebe says, create beautiful world full of attractive people with a sense of honor and duty who voluntarily defend their civilization. Satire. Don't care. I want. Yeah, that's pretty much always my response to people who take a look at something like Starship Troopers and they're like, this is a joke. Well, maybe we should stop laughing. It's
Well, I mean, there's a. I don't know if you ever saw this movie, Auron. It was like a made-for-TV kind of movie about the Rough Riders. Back in the late '80s, early '90s, it had quite a few people that are. I mean, they're still alive nowadays, but I mean, it had this great line at the beginning about a bunch of young men in the midst of the Spanish-American War, and these were all like wealthy sons of politicians and rich men, and they had said something along the lines of, it is the job of the patrician class to defend the interest of the nation and to lead its plebeians into battle. And this is about the Spanish-American War, 1896, and it's nothing, or 1898, but I mean, like, it's nothing that you could ever imagine a wealthy son of some politician or elite of BlackRock say, because they're not associated with this country. They view this place as a tax base and a place to make their money. But a long time ago, this country used to have strong, young, attractive people that were willing to take up arms to defend the national cause and to lead its people into what it saw as the national interest. And I'd like that to happen again. But sadly, we don't have that right now.
Reagan Lodge says, shout out to my doodleist. Good show, guys. Thank you, sir. John Rogers says, on Netflix, there's a new release, Spaceman, where Adam Sandler literally befriends a space bug. Is this the work? Is this the, I think he means the woke being put away. Yeah, I mean, that was the best part, I think, of the renewed Starship Troopers discourse, was the number of leftists who are identifying directly with the bugs. Saying obviously the humans are the bad guys and the bugs are the good guys. It's just the purest distillation of the spiteful mutant thesis. It's a beautiful thing to behold.
Yeah, I love it when communists identify with literal insects again. It's so delightful. It makes me think about my boots.
It's hard to disagree with you guys. Hard to disagree. Thimplar says, hoping the phrase managed democracy gets picked up by the left, because that would be greatly embarrassing for them. Yeah, I would agree.
It's a great term to use regardless.
Yes. Seneca says, progressives continue to underestimate the appeal of ripped super soldiers, screaming prayers, and redacting humanity's enemies. They really do. They really do. I don't know what else to say about that. But
I mean, that Bennett's phylactery tweet is so true.
Yeah,
we're all in 40K. You're just picking sides.
You're just picking sides. Everyone's realizing it's real, and we're all just picking sides. Society Man says, the competency crisis is especially noticeable in gaming right now. Countless American studios went from pumping out bangers every couple of years to taking a decade to make complete tripe. Yeah, I mean, again, obviously, we see this everywhere, and the arts are no exception. When you are constantly trying to fill quotas instead of hiring people who are capable of producing something fun, we just end up with this endless march of mediocrity. Like I said, I had mostly abandoned the idea of playing any of these type of games because I was just so tired of the just relentless grind that was not fun at all. And so that was one reason that this was a breath of fresh air.
I mean, it might be a sense of schadenfreude, but I mean, they're also sort of being punished for it. I mean, between January of 23 and January of 24, there were over 16,000 layoffs in the games industry alone. And I mean, it's unfortunate that people lose their jobs, but at the same time, you look at the last 10 years and you just notice that the quality of gaming has just been progressively going down, with a few diamonds in the rough in between. This is just the result of how bloated and nasty it's gotten.
John Carter says any frog who tries jumping out of the pot is called a reactionary. Don't let boomers control you with that label. Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason to be controlled by that label or anyone really attempting to tell you that things are fine. Like obviously that's not the case. George Hayduke says illiberal non-leftist stories don't need to be and shouldn't be intentionally made. If you want to tell a good story or an ancient story, it won't be lefty. Morrowind, Dark Souls, Blade Runner 2049. Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned this on multiple podcasts with multiple people. Jonathan Peugeot got into this quite a bit when I had him on. But when you tell these naturally true, good, and beautiful stories, they will feel right wing by just naturally. Again, that was kind of my point with the whole they imported all of their leftism into their future fascist empire. And so the only thing that codes as fascism for them is looking cool, having clean streets, and being safe. That's the only thing they could do to produce the feeling of fascism, along with some patriotic buzzwords. And so when you just make these things that are naturally good or naturally interesting in this way, you don't have to strain these really non-leftist stories to fit in some ideological mode. They will simply feel that way naturally because the people around us are so desperately trying to control everything that is said that anything that's not along those lines will stand out on its own.
Absolutely.
And Jonathan BB says, it's not a joke if you have to explain it. Always excellent advice. That is some media literacy there. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. But like I said, make sure that you go ahead and read the original essay over at the Prudentialist Substack. It is excellent. If it's your first time here, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you click the bell, turn on the notifications, everything you need to go ahead and make sure you can catch these streams live. And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, you want to make sure that you can catch these broadcasts and listen to them as podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. When you do leave a rating or review, it really helps with the algorithm magic. Thanks for coming by, guys. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.